it's likely that IT is going to represent between 20 and 40% of your overall carbon footprint.
How are you kind of rolling that into, not necessarily enforce them to become conscious, but the awareness of perhaps other people in their organisation that might be thinking about it?
What is sustainability? How is it relevant to my business, particularly in IT? And where are the challenges, but equally where are the opportunities?
When you're winning new business or looking to win new business, how are you making people aware of that, and what are you using to help them consider it?
Fundamentally, we need to start delivering things in different ways, because the amount of carbon we're producing as a species is still increasing.
You're able to get into the really the nuts and bolts of it and go, this really is what you're doing. We're two tech CEOs talking about navigating the speed of change in the technology industry. This comes from the impact of tariffs, changing supply chains, opportunities with sustainability, getting the best value, but also, most importantly, winning new business. We're going to have an open, honest discussion, really sharing a bit different perspectives from our experiences in our businesses. I'm here with Anthony Levy, who started his business 17 years ago in a financial recession. All great businesses start in tough economic times, they say, and you've done very well. I mean, rapid growth, international expansion, and you've gone through some challenging times. So thinking about Brexit, COVID, supply chain shocks, and a hell of a lot of political change. And you're representing Circularity First, who's really focusing on profitable outcomes with sustainability and technology.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here and to be talking about how to thrive in times of uncertainty. Look, you've been on a pretty powerful journey yourself. 20 years in the tech industry, you've worked across software, distribution, telco, and IT services. You successfully led, I think it's 2 exits, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And now you're into SmartCT, which is a business that focuses on IT services and solutions across all of Europe. An award-winning organisation. It's great to share this platform with you and really to dig into what it's like to run businesses like this.
Yeah, absolutely excited. So it's great to be here with you. Why is tech under the spotlight for sustainability? I know you're going to love this one, and I always love hearing you talk about this, Anthony. So, fastest growing emissions is, AI yet again. One of the top 5 things to decarbonise globally is a technology. And the focus here around elevating the conversation to help us kind of win new business. And how can sustainability really be a way of reducing cost, actually? And, when we talk about reducing cost, actually, how does that translate into winning more business? Someone who's super passionate about this, Anthony, and I know you've been recognised recently at a big awards ceremony for your contributions to the space. What's your view?
Well, let's revisit those stats, because I think it's really important that people start with the why. So you rightly pointed out that IT now represents the fastest growing carbon emission stream. So today it's about 4%, so that's double aviation, but it's expected to reach about 14% by 2040. So that is a really rapid increase, which is why it's the fastest growing. And you're right to highlight AI is one of those contributory factors, which is really driving the rollout of huge numbers of gigantic data centers, which are massively energy consumptive and have loads and loads of physical infrastructure in them. But when we talk about global emissions, I think it's a bit abstract. I think if we think about who your audience of this podcast would be, we are individuals in organizations. And if you're a people-centric organization, using laptops and software to do the majority of your business, it's likely that IT is going to represent between 20 and 40% of your overall carbon footprint. So, if you've got any kind of goals to decarbonize, it's going to be right up there, at least the top 5 things, as you said, that you need to do. Now, how that breaks down depends on your organization, but a big part of that would be scope 2 or scope 3 carbon, depending on what you do. But as you rightly point out, this isn't just a debate around we should do it for the moral reasons. We've got to be thinking about the business case for sustainability, and that's really where I get most passionate. So we're not leading with the heart here. We've got to look at how can businesses weave sustainability into their core business strategy for the growth of the business, to generate value. And I know you specifically mentioned about winning new business. So, we work with a number of different clients that have fundamentally proven that this has changed their relationship with their clients, has allowed them to differentiate and even increase their gross profitability. We work with one client that has introduced remanufactured technology into their supply chain, and they've increased their gross profit by 3% across their entire business. And that trickles straight down to the bottom line. But if you think about differentiation, and this won't necessarily last forever, but right now in tech, can you name a sustainable IT company? Can you think of a brand that puts their hand up and says, we're sustainable, and that you can believe it? Across other industries, you can debate whether you believe them or not, but in cars, you've got low emission cars, you've got energy companies, you've got clothing brands, food brands that are all putting their hands up and saying, we're sustainable.
Yeah.
Anyone in tech? So, think about it. Most companies have some kind of carbon reduction goal. Most companies want to be seen to doing the right thing. So there's a massive opportunity for the first few tech companies to differentially win more business by being the leaders in this space. And it's not incredibly difficult to do so.
And I think consciously we're all becoming more focused on doing the right thing. Even things like, waste, right? I've never been so conscious in my life about, making sure recycling's done appropriately. But when you're selling services or any technology to some customers, they might not be as conscious of that factor. How are you kind of rolling that into, not necessarily enforce them to become conscious, but, the awareness of perhaps other people in their organisation that might be thinking about it?
Well, there's a few points there. So, initially, the whole point of our mindset as individuals and the mindsets we take to work is an interesting one. So, yes, most of us live in renovated homes, drive certified pre-owned cars, perhaps buy refurbished phones and laptops for our kids. In our home lives, we think about recycling, we think about energy use all the time. Sometimes when we turn up at work, we don't. It's not the top of the list. But you're right, it's different decision makers, and I think people don't always feel empowered in organizations. But more than that, I think the starting point comes down to education. So I think, most people get to where they are in their jobs through being very good in their functional area or knowing their industry really well. Sustainability is a whole other topic that people are coming to fresh. So the starting point, it's got to be some education. So when we work with companies, the first point we do is normally run workshops to help them understand, what is sustainability? How is it relevant to my business, particularly in IT? And where are the challenges, but equally where are the opportunities? And to your point then, so moving into that, you might have heard concepts like the circular economy. This is, at the moment we largely live in a linear economy. We extract things out of the ground, we turn them into products, we use them for a bit, and then we throw them away. The circular economy is all about keeping those materials in use for as long as possible. And the interesting thing about a circular economy is it's first of all a different way of thinking. So that has to be introduced and explained. But equally, because you're not building these things from scratch, typically they're lower cost. And that's lower cost actually for the manufacturer to remanufacture. There's lower cost for the reseller, so to put their margins on so they can make harder margins. And equally for the customer, they can also make a saving. So things like the circular economy can add value right across the supply chain and actually be better for everyone and measurably more sustainable.
I want to touch upon reporting and regulation. So in the business I run, we're an SME. We don't actually formally have to report on carbon, sustainability, ESG.
That's right.
But we've started doing it. I think we actually undertake an audit that is probably more intensive than a financial audit. So there's a lot of checks and balances done, and we've learned a lot as a business. A lot of larger organisations are, there's more regulation in place so that their reporting is more formalised. But selling into some businesses, perhaps not as aware of it as it's probably rapid, but certainly enhancing quick. How are you seeing, what's your kind of view on the reporting? How do you, when you're winning new business or looking to win new business, how are you making people aware of that? And what are you using to help them consider it?
It's a really good question. And you're right, I sort of sensed your hesitation there of how fast is reporting evolving? I mean, we had a really rapid push into forcing all organizations basically across Europe to report, and then they're sort of inching back a little bit, which I think makes it a little bit harder for people. If it's a straight line, we know it's coming, we suck it up, we get it done. It's like, oh, if it's eased off, do I need to focus on it as much? But yeah, getting down into kind of how you support customers with it. I mean, we're talking about 2 or 3 different things. So measuring the thing, measuring the carbon impacts is a pretty complex subject on its own, particularly in IT, because these are complicated products. They have complicated supply chains. And let's face it, most of the big tech vendors haven't fallen over themselves to provide transparent data of how much carbon's in them. Right. So, for example, in networking, which is a space we operate in, we actually had to go and build the data sets ourselves. We did the primary research to take apart these products, to do what's called a life cycle analysis, to actually understand how much carbon was in them. What that means for us is actually we can advise customers on how much carbon is embodied in their products. We can give them those reports. We can even advise them when we're designing a new solution for them, which solution has less carbon, whether it's embodied in scope 3 or how much energy they're going to use in scope 2. So it's definitely coming. The direction of travel still in regulation is that we need to report. I think we've spent so much energy focusing on the reporting part that not enough energy has actually gone into the reduction yet. There aren't that many people talking about how they can help you reduce your emissions and your overall carbon footprint. And again, that needs some education, that needs some training, but fundamentally we need to start delivering things in different ways, because the amount of carbon we're producing as a species is still increasing. We're supposed to have halved it by now, and we're still increasing. So we're a long way off hitting like the Paris goals and things like that.
Well, I know as part of my journey about learning about it, you've been really great at helping me with one of our customers' big data center environment, looking at maintaining their infrastructure. So we were kind of coming up with a renewal and looking at talk about some previous episode, talk about value, and going into the depths of actually this is in detail, these devices are consuming this much kind of carbon. And as a data center organization, they were really, really interested because, you hear about crypto, right? Okay, crypto is causing, a lot of consumption in data centers, or even AI, right? I think I heard the other day someone was saying that where people ask please, because we're all, probably generally polite, or our English, not me, I'm Welsh, but the English kind of politeness, we always want to say please and thank you, which is great, but it's consuming that. And how this data center customer was thinking about was, well, actually, what am I using? And, what you were able to get into the detail of is not just some, what quite frankly are estimates. And it's great to have an estimate because it gives you a baseline, but we were able to get into the, really the nuts and bolts of it and go, this really is what you're doing. So using that data in more detail. But, this was great for our business because we were looking to renew an agreement with a customer, really, really important customer of ours, and we were to show extra value that was really, really important to the buyer, the and the shareholders and investors of that business. How do you think that kind of compares to those who are just estimating but kind of getting into the detail?
So it's a really good question, because if I'm candid, like all carbon reporting is estimation. It's just there's some really, really poor estimation and some much better estimation. So most people at the moment, when it comes to scope 3, and that's, for those who don't know, scope 3 is really what it takes to build something in the first place. So that whole extraction and manufacture process. Most people are using a spend-based metric for that. So they're saying you spend £1 on technology, you're going to get this much carbon. Now think about that, how good that is as a metric. If you buy one laptop, you might pay £1,000 for it. If you buy 1,000 laptops, you might get them at half the price. Does that mean that you've halved the emissions of each of those laptops? Probably not. So spend-based metrics is what people have historically used, and it's even allowed in some of the big kind of certification programs because there's this absence of data. But the data we provide, it was based on actually, taking the products apart and mapping that journey through the extraction of the materials, what it takes to manufacture them, what it takes to transport them. So it's a much better estimation, and one that's going to be way more valid and way more useful for a customer. We did a project for the MOD to compare spend-based measurements with our LCA data. Their data was plus or minus 70%. So what other KPI would you trust when someone gave you the data? Oh, your profit is plus or minus 70% this. You wouldn't trust that, would you?
Be a little worried.
You'd be a little worried, right? So that's exactly the point. So like, look, this whole world is evolving. Regulations evolving, people's response to it is evolving, but we can't lose sight of the fact that actually what we're trying to do is meaningfully reduce these impacts whilst also creating profit, creating value, and building our businesses for growth.
Okay, so what we're talking about is tech, big focus on sustainability. You can actually use it to help you win, renew, show greater value to your customers, and getting a bit more detail can be really helpful to move away from the broad spectrum of that kind of 70% or zero. What's the difference? That's really really important to people.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely move quite far beyond spend-based metrics to get some useful insights and use it to drive commercial outcomes with your customers.